Magandang araw sa lahat ng online brewers at listeners sa buong mundo. Welcome back to Brewsroom Studios at nandito kami ngayon sa Cubao Expo, brewing something new for you. At maraming salamat sa Resback at sa Silingan Coffee sa pagkupkop sa amin ngayong bagong season ng Cup of Jorn. So kung gusto niyo pumunta rito at mag-rent ng spaces nila ay mangyari lamang na kontakin ng Resback at Silingan para sa iba pang impormasyon. So ayun, mula sa last time na accountability in media virality na tinalakay natin last time, marami pa tayong pagkukwentuhan tungkol sa mga karanasan ng isang periodista bago mailapag sa hapag ang balita. At sa panibagong yugto ng Cup of Jorn, ating palalalimin at palalawakin ang usapin ng trauma journalism. So for our third episode, let us unveil the unseen scars of election coverages. I am Mary Rose Maligmat of PUP Journalism 31D, and we welcome you to the second edition of Cup of Jorn. Kung may kukumpara ko sa isang drink, ang episode natin today, marahil ito ay isang kapeng barako. Dahil magbabalik tanaw tayo sa mapait na realidad na kinakaharap ng mga election reporters. Maaaring may mga sugat na muling mabubuksan as we navigate this niche of trauma journalism, kaya paunawa sa ating mga tagapakinig at manonood na maaaring maging distressing sa ilan ang paksa natin ngayon. So feel free to pause and to breathe. Ayun. Without further ado, I am honored na ipakilala sa inyo ang aming two esteemed guests for today. Ayan. One of them is a board member of the National Union of Journalists in the Philippines, training director of Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism, and a War and Peace reporting trainer. Also, we have with us is the founder and executive director of the Center for Community Journalism Development, regional coordinator of International News Safety Institute in Southeast Asia, principal author of Reporting Human Rights in the Philippines 2009 Handbook, and one of the country's first media safety trainers. Please welcome our veteran election reporters, Ms. Rowena Paraan and Sir Red Batario. Ayan.
Thank you.
So ayun po, welcome sa Cup of Jorn, Ms. Weng and Sir Red. So kumusta naman po kayo, especially after nung months-long election coverage natin?
Traumatized.
Bakit po?
Because of the results.
Okay lang naman. I mean, nakarelax na rin naman after a few weeks.
So, the recent election has been interesting talaga kasi with all the unprecedented wins, especially from the side of the opposition din. And syempre, yung mga ally fallouts, alam na natin kung ano yung dalawang panig na yon. And syempre, the worst of all, yung deepening political divide sa lipunan natin ngayon. So, we can say na itong election na to is highly significant. And syempre, masasabi natin na turning point sa recent history natin. So, with that po, dumakot po tayo dun sa usapin ng election reporting in the Philippines. So, pag-uusapan lang natin yung context ng election sa bansa. So, ayun po, since recently lang po nagkaroon ng automated elections, probably mga around 2010 po siya, di ba? We are curious po kung paano po yung kalakaran noon nung mano-mano pa yung election. So, can you share with us po yung hindi niyo po malilimutang karanasan?
We'll have to go back 1,000 years, no? I think my coverage then, nung 1981, yung natatanda, 1981, imagine, many of you were not born yet. It was the election that was rigged, of course, in the favor of the dictator, Ferdinand Marcos Sr. Ang tumakbo noon ay si General Alejo. Ano nga yung first name niya. But anyway, siya yung pinatakbo ng administration. But as a reporter, I was trying to dig deeper into that and trying to find out, ito nga ba stooge ni Marcos or is he running on his own? Because he's respected. He was a war hero. So why did he run? No? Ang biggest danger no, na hinaharap ko at saka yung mga the other journalists at that time, remember it's martial law. The press is controlled. I was working with the Daily Express, a crony paper. So, ano yung danger na hinaharap ng mga journalists? It's really more of coercion. Hindi nga soft coercion kasi they will try to do it through envelopes. No? To try to sway reporters in projecting the image that the other side would want, no? Meaning the administration side. The other is, if we talk about covering elections at that time, it's really on the part of journalists not having this safety consciousness, sa pagmamadali to be able to get the story no matter what, sakay na lang kahit saan, to be able to get ahead of the others, to be able to get the story. But in terms of election coverage, yung natatandaan ko lang noon, way back, ay wala namang protocols ang newsroom to impart to reporters who are going on field on what to do, especially when covering candidates, when on the campaign trail, what to avoid and what to do. Yung mga ganon. So wala pang kamalayan nun ang mga newsrooms.
Hindi naman 1981. Medyo...
1989 naman.
Ninisip ko tuloy kung ano yung pinaka-memorable in terms of coverage. Siyempre yung snap elections. No? And I'm sure hindi pa kayo buhay. Or probably even your parents. Kasi iba talaga yun. That was watershed siya sa Philippine history. In fact, sa world history. No? Which led to people power. The EDSA Revolution. So, yun. Pero kung mas recent history, yung 2016 election, sobrang traumatic, kung trauma yung pag-uusapan natin. Kasi, at the time, nasa ABS-CBN ako, tas hawak ko yung segment ng Bayan Mo Ipatrol Mo. So, we were getting reports from citizen journalists na hindi naman ganun ka-trained, no? Hindi sila, of course, may konti silang training how to get information, pero hindi sila journalist. And nung time na yun, nag-start na yung hostility, no? Lalo na on the part of the Duterte campaign na against media. Kasi minsan pag pinakalala mong taga-ABS ka, ano agad, no? Dinudumog o kaya may bashing. Sobrang traumatic in that sense. But it was also during that election na mas makita mo kung paano ginamit yung digital platforms sa election, whether sa negative campaigning or para mag-inform ng public. Pero hindi pa ganun kataas din, no, yung consciousness in terms of how do you use social media, how do you respond kapag may... So, ang mga journalists who were getting bashed, ang tendency was just to step back. Yung iba nagsara ng kanilang accounts, hindi sumagot, kasi, and even sa amin, sa ABS, ang utos kasi, huwag kayo mag-engage, so hindi ka papatol. So, parang, ang hirap-hirap ng posisyon mo na kailangan mong tingnan lahat ng sinasabi and yet di ka pwedeng magtanggol, di ka pwedeng sumagot.
Parang dagdag na trauma yun, ano?
Oo,
yung gigil ka na tapos hindi mo
Sobra, hindi ka makasagot.
Nandito sa ano mo.
Lalo na dun sa level ng mga editors, lalo na kami kasi I was part of the news management committee, hindi ka talaga pwede.
Nalala ko nga rin po nung 2016, siguro po mag-high school po ako nun. Sobrang laganap din po talaga siya na naglipa na po yung mga yung mga pro-Marcos pages, yung mga historical revisionism, and then part of their propaganda rin po is yung nagsisimula na pong i-discredit yung mga yung mga institutions such as yung mga news outlets din po. So ayun. Ngayon naman po kung matatandaan sa 2025 elections naman po, iniulat naman po ng PNP na generally peaceful po yung elections. Pero on the other hand, yung sinasabi naman po ng kontradaya is in the contrary, since maraming anomalya, ganun. And syempre, we also have the EU Election Observation Mission po na nag-cite sila ng na merong media inaccessibility po sa pag-cover. And then, another observation din po nila is that violence persists, especially po at local levels, lalo na po yung sa political, lalo na po sa mga localities na may mga political dynasties in power. So, how true is this naman po on the ground?
So, siguro, from colleagues on the ground, our partners, no? kasi we have fellows on the ground, yung Center for Community Journalism. We have fellows, no? And yung feedback on the ground, especially in hotspot areas like Abra, like Masbate, parts of Maguindanao, dating Central Mindanao lang yan. Ganun pa rin yung situation in terms of political warlords holding sway in those local areas. So klaro naman kung paano gumalaw yung mga reporters, what to avoid and what not, what to avoid and what to do. Especially those who have been covering elections for the longest time. And these are veteran journalists. Ang problem is the new ones who are assigned to cover elections. I didn't really know the local dynamics kahit na nasa ganun silang lugar. Like, as simple as the color of your shirt or your dress when you go on coverage. Hindi mo alam na yung kulay ng damit mo ay kakulay ng campaign color ng isang politician, pwede kang malagay sa alanganin. As simple as that. Kulang doon. But at the same time, makikita mo din yung warlordism and feudalism is still at play at sa local areas. Yung intimidation, hindi lang sa media, kundi sa electorate. No? In fact, titigil lang yung walang boboto, walang lalabas. Kahit ba automated yan, etc. Nananaig yun. So, ganun yung situation at the local level.
Yung PNP, may problema sila kung paano nila, para sa akin, no, how they define election violence. Kasi pag nagbilang sila, yung incident has to fall within the election period. Sa experience ko sa documentation ng attacks against media, and I handled for around 10 years yung media safety program ng National Union of Journalists of the Philippines. So we have documented. So may mga attacks ng media, even killings that happened beyond the election period, pero alam mong election-related. So Jerry Ortega case, for example, ng Palawan, nangyari siya, tapos na yung election, pero everybody in the media community sa Palawan, alam nila na may kinalaman yun dun sa natapos na eleksyon. So, yung PNP figure, kailangan, pagka ginagamit natin siya, we need to ask them to define. Paano nyo binilang yan? Kasi sasabihin nila na ito lang yung mga incident na nangyari magmula nung tinatawag na election period. So, yan kailangan siyang i-check. Kasi, kung minsan yung rest back sa media, pag hindi nagustuhan yung how the election was covered, nangyayari yan. Hindi naman nila iniisip kung election period pa, hindi. Nangyayari yan even after, long after the elections. So, sa media, sa journalist, yung impact ng election, hindi lang siya immediately after, but even long after. Siguro pangalawa, yung issue ng yung sinasabi ni Sir Red kanina, yung safety sa election coverage. Siguro kung minsan merong discussion sa newsroom na ganito yung gagawin, pero hindi yan ganun kadetalyado na ano yung mga protocols pagdating na specific sa election coverage. So, yun yung gusto rin sana nating mangyari, na magkaroon ng parang formal na protocol sa loob ng mga news organizations kung paano nila titiyakin na ligtas yung mga reporters nila. At hindi lang reporters, the entire team, no? Kung may driver, cameraman, photographer, dapat kasama sila dun sa kinoconsider sa usapin ng safety. Pero kasi hindi siya tinitingnan ng ganun eh. Parang kung minsan, pinapalarga sila na normal coverage lang ng kung ano. So, hindi masyadong nakikita. And I'm just talking about physical safety. E di lalo na yung psychological.
So, sa dating kalakaran po, wala po bang parang post coverage na debriefing tulad po ng ginagawa ngayon?
Kung 1,000 years ago.
Wala kasi, diba, nung bata pa si Red, ang is parang, if it's too hot, get out of the kitchen. So parang, bahagi yan ng trabaho. Kung di mo kaya, huwag ka mag-journalist. Mag-accountant ka o whatever, na hindi ka malalagay sa ganung situation, hindi ka mababother sa kung anong nakikita mo. Spreadsheets na lang ang tingnan mo. Pero kasi, when we started doing trauma, addressing yung issue ng trauma, this was mga 2010, 2011. Hindi rin pinag-uusapan yung trauma. Kaya, ang hirap ibenta nung una, na kailangan, hindi katulad ngayon na you're talking about it. Some newsrooms have actually implemented some programs, although limited. Pero nun, hindi mo talaga siya maririnig. In fact, yung safety pa yung binibenta pa namin na kailangan bigyan nyo ng safety equipment yung mga journalists. Nandun ka pa sa level na yon at nandun pa sila sa level na grudgingly recognizing na physical safety has to be addressed by the newsroom. Tapos pag dinagdag mo yung sa mental health, hindi yun masyado. Ngayon, nagsimula lang nilang tingnan na mahalaga yung mental health. Nung nagkaroon ng malalaking disasters, like nung bagyong Sendong, na dumating kasi yung tubig gabi. So, ang tindi nung nangyari sa mga taga Iligan at saka Cagayan de Oro. And we had a lot of journalists who were affected. So, nung gumawa kami ng activity na trauma peer support para sa media, doon nakita na mahalaga pala to at saka nakakatulong pala na i-address, tingnan tong usapin na to. Pero kailangan mo ng isang bagyo para i-address yon. Tapos hindi rin yun nagtuloy-tuloy, parang isang one-shot deal. And then nangyari yung Yolanda. So yung Yolanda talaga, yung parang nag-push na kailangan tingnan to. So gumawa kami ng trauma peer support activity sa lahat ng areas affected ng Yolanda. So buong Eastern Visayas, tapos Cebu, Bohol, yung mga dinaanan niya na area. Ngayon mas na siya, mas pinag-uusapan with COVID, with the killings, yung EJK kasi gumawa kami na ng debriefing para sa mga nag-cover yung mga graveyard shifts na nag-cover ng mga killings. So yun, ano palang...
Tsaka even before that, iba, yung sa Maguindanao Massacre, iba, yung effect on the journalists, other journalists, especially those who survive in the sense na nahuli sila sa biyahe. Yung ganon. So kailangan talagang bigyan ng pansin. And I'm so happy na journalists and media organizations are starting to realize na importante na pag-usapan ang trauma. Pag-usapan yung mental health ng mga reporters and mga editors. So marami rin siyang pinagdaanan na proseso. It took some time, no? Pero ngayon nga, as you said, kayo yun ang focus nyo. Mas magandang tingnan talaga how to move it forward.
Parang ang nakikita ko po dito from what you're saying po is parang kaugnay din po siya dun sa unti-unting pagbukas ng mindset ng mga tao in regards po sa mental health since siguro po mga around 2016 din po ata nun. Yung medyo umingay din po through social media yung mga mental health awareness. So I think isa din po yun sa factors kung bakit mas madali na po nating i-navigate yung trauma journey. And we're thankful for that. So, a very prominent case nga po yung Maguindanao Massacre, which is noong 2009. This is where 32 out of 58 na kabilang sa convoy ay na-massacre po ng mga political goons. So, ayun, tinagurian po siya ng Committee to Protect Journalists at the time na bilang single deadliest event for journalists in history. So, ayun po, backtrack po tayo sa nangyari nung araw na yun. Can you share with us po yung yung mga nangyari before and after the incident? Like, ano po yung nabalitaan nyo from your colleagues po? Meron na po ba silang naobserbahan na mga red flags sa area po?
I don't know if there were red flags that they noticed, no? Kasi the first intimation of something terrible that has happened was a text message from a colleague from Mindanao. Natutulog na ako noon biglang parang naka-silent yung phone pero I could feel like it was vibrating No, so I opened it and he was asking, ano yung nangyayari sa hindi Maguindanao sabi niya sa Ampatuan, because that's the area, that's the district. No? Ano yung nangyayari sa Ampatuan? Why? I was saying, ano ba nangyayari? Because he's from Mindanao. I don't know, parang there's something na nangyari sa group of journalists with the group of Mangudadatu going to another town in Mindanao to file his election candidacy. So yun yung first intimation ko na merong something has happened. So I had to call all other colleagues, Sinaweng, etc. to find out what's happening. My first reaction was disbelief. Kasi parang how can this happen? Sabi kasi may namatay na so many, no? Yung buong convoy nawala. Pero it's something that's so difficult to wrap your mind around because of the enormity. No? Yung parang how can this abomination happen? Ano? Pero kailangan natin tingnan din niya. Yun yung una kong intimation na merong terrible na nangyari. And later on, ang nag-communicate sa akin, nag-get in touch with sa akin ay si Achilles Sonyo, one of the reporters there, who is also our fellow, and who was late for the convoy, and hindi siya nakasama doon. So, siya yung nagsabi na may nangyari, hindi niya alam yung numbers, but almost all of those who were in the convoy were killed. No? So parang ganon, how we were able to piece that together. And I think Sinaweng yung nakapunta agad to be able to find out exactly what has happened in the area. Pero tingnan din natin yung context niyang Maguindanao, although I might be jumping ahead of our discussion, yung political experience and political situation, kasi yung the rise of the Ampatuans to power is linked to politics. No, sa national yan no? Yung control niya national, pero gumagalaw sa baba because these clans can deliver the votes. So yung ganon, so they're being tolerated, if not exactly being funded, but they are left to their own devices to be able to do what they want and to shore up their power. So yung ganon yung context on why something like that could have happened.
Ma'am Wen, ask ko lang po, nung pumunta po kayo sa Maguindanao, how did you feel po? That moment?
Bago pa yan, nung dumating pa lang yung balita, actually, nakamonitor kami kasi yung mga reporters ng Mindanao started sending messages. Una 15, 19, then 24, parang patas ng patas yung bilang ng nawawala. Actually, yun yung una nilang sinabi, nawawala yung convoy na papunta dapat sa COMELEC. Tapos, binibilang nila sino-sino, tapos palaki ng palaki. So, even nung pumunta kami, hindi talaga namin alam ilan yung patay na journalist. Ang alam lang is malaki yung bilang nung lahat nung pinatay. Pero ilan doon ng media, hindi namin alam. So, nangyari ng Monday, Tuesday we had a press con, yung NUJP. And then Wednesday, nandun kami. Nung Wednesday, pinuntahan namin agad yung massacre site. Tapos, inabutan pa namin yung backhoe na paghukay, pagtaas ng backhoe, makikita mo merong nakalaylay na kamay o paa na nakuha. And then maririnig mo sa background yung mga pamilya na sumisigaw, umiiyak, naghahanap na tinitingnan nila kung kamag-anak nila yung nahukay. Tapos nandun kami nung nilabas yung sasakyan ng UNTV na pit-pit siyang parang lata ng sardinas na yupi-yuping ganon. Kasi binaon sila Marami dun sa mga pinatay, nakabaon sila sa lupa kasama yung mga sasakyan. So, pero meron ding ibang, and sorry sa mga nanonood kung very graphic. Pero kasi magandang makita kung ano yung nakita ng mga reporter na nag-cover at that time. So, yung Masalay, rolling hills. In fact, nung papasok kami, yung isa kong kasamang reporter ng Mindanao, sabi niya, ang ganda ng lugar na to. This is such a beautiful place to die. Sabi niya gano'n. And we haven't seen, di pa namin narating, no? Maganda talaga siya, rolling hills na puro mais yung makikita mo. Tapos pagdating mo dun sa site, yun, may cordon, may sa isang bahagi nandun yung mga umiiyak, sumisigaw na pamilya, yung mga reporters na sa isang side. Ako I wasn't covering, no? I was there for NUJP. Hindi ko alam kung saan ko ipupwesto yung sarili ko. So pumunta ako dun sa medyo clear na parang hindi masyadong maraming tao. Tapos later, saka ko lang na-realize, dun pala nilalagay yung mga bangkay na nakukuha from the pit. Na may takip lang silang dahon ng saging. So imagine niyo yun na maayos yung pila niya, nakapila siya ng ganyan. Yung parang tinda sa palengke na nakaayos ng gano'n. Tapos nandyan siya. Kaya pala ang lakas ng amoy kasi puro pala bangkay yung nandun sa tabi ko. Tapos, pag nandun ka, hindi mo, parang ang iniisip mo lang, gawin mo yung kailangan mo, anong kukunin mo. And we didn't know how many were journalists. So what we had to do was to go to all the wakes. Ang daming wake. Bawat week, kakausap ka ng widow, ng pamilya. Tapos kailangan mong tanungin ano bang trabaho niya, kailan pa siya nandyan sa dyaryo na yan. Hanggang nabuo namin 31 na names. So may kulang na isa kasi 32. Yung pang 32, balik-balik pa kami ng General Santos, Sultan Kudarat kasi hinahanap namin or may nagsabi na may isa pa na hindi alam kung media o hindi. Pero syempre kailangan mong i-verify kung media siya. So hinahanap namin yung opisina. Hindi. Yung opisina pala ay address lang nung isang nagtatrabaho doon. So it wasn't really an office. So ang hirap niyang hanapin. Tapos van driver kasi siya na palaging hire ng mga media. Pero natuto yatang kumuha, so naging siyang photojournalist. And before the massacre, lumabas yung unang kopya ng dyaryo na nandun na siya sa staff box. So, kailangan naming hanapin yung proof na yon. Yung ganun ba, ang hirap. Tapos, kailangan mo kausapin yung local community, local media. So, inipon namin sila. Tinanong namin yung bawat isa na pangalan kasi kailangan mo i-verify. Kahit pa sinabi sa burol, kailangan mo pa rin itanong sa local. Sila yung nakakaalam. Tapos yun. Tapos, ang problem ko siguro before, at that time was, I wasn't doing it as a journalist. I was doing it for the organization. So, hindi siya sang storya na pagkatapos mo gawin, alis ka na, you go on to the next story. Yun kasi may campaign, kinausap mo yung mga surviving families, may trauma activity para sa pamilya, nag-ayos kami ng scholarship, livelihood, tas may hearing, may campaign, muntik na makalabas sila Saldi Ampatuan because of an order by the acting Secretary of Justice. So lahat yun. So parang for several months, yung hinga mo ay puro tungkol sa massacre. So yun, sobrang, hindi ko lang, ito ba yung tanong mo? pero yun kasi, and it wasn't just me, kasama ko yung si Melanie Pinlac, who's now a lawyer ng NUPL. But at that time, siya yung staff ng Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility. Kaming dalawa yung umikot talaga ng todo. And for the two of us, hindi lang siya isang documentation of an incident. It was a continuing campaign na kailangan wag niyong bitawan. Ang hirap. Tapos kahit yung siyempre yung mga media rin na taga doon, ang tindi rin nung impact sa kanila, no? Si Achilles, namatay na si Achilles, no? Pero yung impact sa kanya was such that kahit natutulog siya, may dala siyang baril. At di lang isa. So nung time na after so many years, nag-message siya sa akin na, Weng, lumabas ako ngayon. wala akong dala. Ano yun, parang malaking tagumpay yun. Kasi for the first time, nakalabas siya ng hindi siya nag-iisip na may papatay sa kanya. Kakain siya, uwi siya, kakain siya, patay yung ilaw para hindi nalalaman na nakauwi na siya. So, and may iba-ibang level naman yung epekto, pero si Achilles yung mukhang matindi. Taka yung massacre kasi binasag niya yung isang safety precaution lagi. Dapat pag marami kayo, mas safe kayo. Ito ang dami nila, diba? Pero hindi sila safe. So parang mag-iisip ka ngayon kung coverage na to, is it worth risking your life? Okay lang ba na pagkatapos nito hindi ka makakatulog? So isipin mo mabuti, paano yung pamilya mo? Kasi sanay tayo. Journalist, prepare yan di ba? Sa psychologically na you always put your life at risk. Pero yung pamilya mo, hindi kasama yun sa equation. So pag kasama na yung pamilya, mas nakaka-disturb.
Kabilang po ba si Sir Achilles dun po dun sa kasi di ba po after the massacre journalists in Mindanao were covering that po, and meron pong case na pinagbantaan daw po yung mga journal na nagko-cover ng massacre, and ang sabi sa kanila is tigilan na yung pag-cover since may na-offend daw po na ibang tao.
Hindi ko alam kung kasama si Aki dyan. Pero ano na yun parang given na lahat kayo after that mag-iisip ka kung gusto mo ba. Ang nakabasag to a certain extent was the solidarity. Ganun kahalaga yung support na binigay sa bansa at saka globally, no? Kasi kung walang mata ng mundo na nakatutok dun sa takbo ng trial, anong nangyayari sa pamilya, I don't think makukuha ng yung ganong klaseng conviction, or that support would pour or bubuhos yung suporta para dun sa mga pamilya. So, malaking bagay yung support, yung solidarity, and ang tindi ng ginawa ng NUJP doon. As in, hindi niya talaga binitawan yung kampanya. Every 23rd of the month, for so many years, kahit 6 lang kami, magtitiri kami ng kandila sa Boy Scout Circle, para lang for people to remember na meron kayong ganito na dapat binabantayan. And it worked, no? It worked. Kasi tuloy-tuloy yung tingin ng mga tao doon. Hindi lang NUJP yun. Mga news organizations, yung dating very conservative, nag-candlelighting sila sa kanilang mga newsrooms. Tapos yung mga press corps, Department of Foreign Affairs, press corps, Malacanang press corps, nag-host sila ng mga protest. So yung opportunity din to mobilize yung media community to raise public awareness on the issue of killings of journalists, nagawa yun because of that.
As mentioned din po earlier na wala po gaanong mechanisms regarding trauma journalism. So, we would like to ask if ano po yung pagtingin nyo na ways para ma-institutionalize sa mga newsroom yung pag-safeguard po dun sa mental health ng mga reporters nila?
You have to be opportunistic, meaning you grab the opportunity. Kung may pagkakataon na pwede mong i-promote yung usapin na mental health, you take that opportunity. Huwag kang maghintay ng kung kailan nila maisipan na, sige, okay na kami sa issue na yan. Hindi gano'n, no? So, Sendong, Yolanda, COVID, EJK, drug war, shutdown ng ABS, yung lahat ng mga issues na yon, tuntungan mo yung mga issue para i-push mo yung kahalagahan ng kailangan yung tingnan yung mental well-being ng mga nagtatrabaho sa media. Hindi sapat na hintayin mo sila. And because of that campaign, yung ganung pagpupursige, may mga news organizations that to a certain extent created programs. Like halimbawa sa ABS-CBN, they actually made available medical professionals na kung yung isang reporter ay gusto ng counseling session with a psychiatrist or psychologist, pwede kang mag-request. Tapos yun, confidential yun. And you don't even have to tell your boss about it. You just go straight to to HR, and then mag-set ka ng schedule. So may mga ganon. Tapos yung pag may malaking incident. Recently, yung women organization that we organized, yung We Move, Movement for the Safety and Welfare of Women Journalists. Pinagsimulan yan, mental health So dahil nakita dun sa isang activity sa Cebu ng puro kababaihan na journalist na ito yung dinaranas ng mga babae na nagtatrabaho sa media, kailangan siyang tugunan. And that led to the formation of the organization, and that led to several activities na related sa psychosocial health. So yun, yung mga nag-a-advocate, kailangan conscious. Tapos, ang reality is, of course, ABS-CBN is a network na merong resources. Ang problema ay pagdating sa community press, wala siyang hindi niya kayang magkaroon ng in-house na psychologist or psychiatrist. Hindi niya kayang isend yung kanyang mga staff para magpatingin. So, yun yung challenge because the bigger part ng community ay walang access sa ganung services.
Siguro, Weng, yung kaso na yun, pwede mo idagdag yun sa peer support Diba? Yung part to address...
Yun ang solusyon.
Yun ang solution. Part of the solution. Pero ikaw rin magkukwento nun. Kasi kayo nag-start nun sa ABS.
Hindi naman sa NUJP. Nung chair ako ng NUJP, or before I became chair, we attended a fellowship ng DART Journalism and Trauma. Yeah, this is an institution na project siya ng Columbia University sa New York. So the main office is in Columbia, but they have an Asia-Pacific office sa Australia, sa Melbourne. And they have an Asia-Pacific fellowship every 2 years. So dalawa kami na nakapag-attend among the officers, si Nonoy Espina at saka ako. Actually, nauna sila Nonoy, tapos nandun ako sa next batch. Pagtas nung batch ko, that's when we started doing peer support work. This is training fellow journalists paano maging peer supporter. Hindi niya pinapalitan yung function ng psychologist, pero paano ka tutugon kapag meron kang kasamahan na nagdaraan sa ganitong sitwasyon. So may training yon, may orientation, pero dati kasi meron kaming safety trainers, may pool ng safety trainers. So ang una naming train yung mga safety trainers para sila rin yung mag-handle ng trauma. And at the same time, nag-expand yung So yun yung tumugon nung dumating ang Sendong, ang Yolanda, at yung iba pang mga bagyo at iba pang mga issues. Ito yung mga naging core nung Maganda yung peer support kasi nakita ko na yun pagka medical professional ang kausap mo, ang dami mong kailangan ipaliwanag. Bakit stressful tong sitwasyon na to? Kasi hindi naman niya naiintindihan what stresses a journalist, anong stresses sa newsroom. So ipapaliwanag mo pa, imbis na tuloy-tuloy ka lang nagkukwento, you have to have so many explanations. Pero kapag peer supporter ang kausap mo, peer, meaning coming from the media himself, hindi mo na magpapaliwanag. Nagkakaintindihan kayo, mas mabilis. So, mas yun. And I think it's a good program na pwedeng gawin sa community press, even sa big networks, yung ginawa sa ABS-CBN, yung activity nun na para sa mga nag-cover ng drug war. Yun, lahat yun pinatakbo ng peer support. mahigit 75 na journalists, drivers, cameramen yung nag-attend. Some of them, meron pang second and third round, depende sa request.
Sir Red, bilang bahagi din po ng community journalism, how do you cope with such matters din po? Given na wala pong as mentioned din po ni Ma'am kanina na wala pong resources to institutionalize mental health. Ano po yung nagiging measures ng mga community press natin when it comes to this?
Usually, simple lang naman yung ginagawa nila. Sometimes they just need to have someone to be able to talk to. Paano na share experience? Ano yung mga nararamdaman nila? It's really to be able to express oneself and to be able to validate it with somebody who knows the work that he's doing. Tulad niya sinabi ni Weng, yung peer support program, malaking tulong na ibibigay sa mga journalists. Lalo na doon sa mga nagko-cover ng very stressful assignments. So yun, kailangan lang tingnan na ano yung opportunities for journalists to be able to share what they had gone through with somebody na they can trust. Kasi sa peer support din kailangan merong measure of trust. Kasi you're sharing your own personal feelings, yung mga yung naramdaman mo, etc., etc. So kailangan yan to be treated in confidence.
Ngayon, as election trends are changing and syempre, ang politicians rise and fall, and sa ngayon, what can we expect naman po dun sa future ng election reporting?
On the bright side, we hope to see more critical reporting, meaning to be able to dive deeper into the issues rather than covering the elections as number one, as some sort of a horse race. Kasi nakikita ko ngayon yung trend, although matagal na itong nangyayari, it's still the same thing. Journalists, reporters, editors, newsrooms, news organizations are covering elections as a horse race between candidates. Sino yung nauna, sino yung mataas ang ranking sa surveys, etc., etc., without being able to help people understand better ano ba yung mga plataforma nito, what do they stand for, and what are they putting on the table on behalf of citizens. No, they want to run for public office, but masyadong marami yung noise in terms of who's leading who. And then, sino yung magkaaway, political dynasty versus political dynasty, but losing sight of the whole environment in which people will be able to understand better. Paano ba namin pipiliin yung tamang kandidato para kami makaboto ng mas maayos? Kasi nga, nadadala sila doon. Ano? I think that's one, I'm not saying lahat ng media ganun, but parang ganun yung trend. No? Pag binasa mo, nanood ka sa TV, nakinig ka sa radyo, sino yung nangunguna, sino yung mas maraming sinasabi versus another candidate. So it's all noise. So kailangan siguro yung more thoughtful kind of journalism. But then again, babangga ka naman dyan doon sa kalaban din ng media as we know it, with social media and the trolls and disinformation and misinformation. So yun yung mga challenges. No? But I think given the fact that so many lessons learned covering previous elections, I think there's also some sort of a movement towards improving reporting. Medyo matagal yan, medyo mahirap-hirap gawin, but I think we can go that way with organizations like NUJP and others. And I would like to think itong ang newly formed namin na movement for Media Safety Philippines will be able to help in terms of increasing consciousness about that, advocating for better journalism, yung ganon, advocating for safety.
Ang problema sa the way we cover elections, masyado siyang event-oriented. Kailan ang filing, kailan ang eleksyon, sinong nanalo, anong sinabi nino, saan pumunta si kandidato, sinong nagsumpa na. Masyado siyang nakafocus sa ano yung event. It doesn't really dig deep pagdating dun sa mga issues na mas kailangan tutukan. Issues, for example, like campaign finance. Yung usapin ng premature campaigning, parang 2004 ako nag-start magturo ng election reporting. Grabe yung issue na yan noon. Pero parang this election, saka lang siya medyo ni-raise. Yung political dynasty, issue na yan forever. Pero ngayong election na to, for some reason, nagi siyang matingkad, no? So, may pag-asa in that sense because some old issues na mahalaga are suddenly being talked about na in previous elections medyo na-ignore. Pero sana yung pagsisimula ng pag-uusap tungkol sa mga usapin na yun, hindi siya dapat huminto ngayong panahon lang ng eleksyon. And that's also one of the problems. We tend to look at elections as coverage para sa parang PNP within election period na hindi dapat ganon. Kasi yung ipinangako sa panahon ng eleksyon, dapat sinisingil siya, di ba? Pag tapos na yung eleksyon. Dapat tingnan magkano yung ginastos. Kasi sabi sa batas, 5 piso, 3 piso ang budget ng kandidato para sa bawat botante. Na bigyan mo lang ng isang kape yan, dagpas ka na sa 5 piso. So alam natin hindi totoo yung pinafile. And yet nobody really looks at the campaign expenses report ng mga politiko. So parang kasalanan din natin, di ba? Kung bakit ganun din yung pagtingin ng mama yan pagdating sa eleksyon. So kailangan ayusin din natin how we treat election coverage. Hindi siya dapat event-oriented, tingnan siya ng issues at saka tingnan siya beyond the election period.
Gusto ko dagdagan yung sinabi ni Weng, yung beyond election period. Kasi nga parang yung sa issue ng citizenship, tingin natin, nakaboto na tayo, tapos na yung trabaho natin. I just would like to share, yung nare-recall ko lang, yung initiatives namin before with the CCJD sa local level. Tawag namin dito yung ulat ng bayan, ulat sa bayan. Para siyang reporting system after the elections kasi parang merong process wherein journalists and citizens come together na parang magkakaroon ng series of activities wherein yung mga politiko, mga candidates, para mag-a-apply sila for job. Pero ito yung ipe-present ng mga journalists sa mga tao, yung people's agenda. Ito yung 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 na gusto namin makita sa inyong plataforma. And then they will say, mga candidates will say, okay, gusto namin lahat yan, and then we will include that in our agenda. After the elections, whoever wins, after 100 days, magre-report back siya sa people. Sisingilin naman sila ng mga taong bayan. Alin dito yung na-achieve natin ninyo? And then we will hold you accountable. Bakit hindi pa ito na-achieve, etc., etc. I think we can also look into those mechanisms. Yung post-election, kasi kailangan patindihin din yung citizenship aspect ng buhay natin. Kasi nakatutok lang tayo. Halimbawa, elections, sabi nga ni Weng, as just an event, no? Pero marami siyang pagdadaanan pa, parang proseso yan. The way I look at journalism also as something like that. Process siya, hindi tapos na nakapaggawa tayo ng istorya, na-publish na siya, tapos na yung trabaho. I think we should look at the outcome. So, ganun din, yung pagtingin na ang election is a long process. That's just a part of the process ng governance, actually. And paano tayo magiging bahagi para ma-improve natin yung ating situation at saka yung mga ipinangako, natupad ba talaga yan? Yung singilan part yung kulang sa atin, yung monitoring and then singilan.
Ayun po. So, to end our discussion po, ano po yung masasabi natin sa mga aspiring journalists who want to carry on the tradition ng critical journalism and syempre yung amid the threats?
Ang dami, Pero isa lang yung masasabi ko, always keep in mind that journalism is essentially a discipline of verification. Hindi siya journalism pag hindi mo bine-verify. Sometimes you get lost again in the noise. And journalism serves a higher purpose. It's really to be able to provide information that people will be able to use. Yung citizens, yung saying na pwede nating magamit itong information na ito. So yun yung kailangan gawin ng isang journalist, and also to avoid yung issues of disinformation and misinformation, yung fact-checking, etc., etc. Yung principles of journalism should be adhered to. Now, when we talk about safety, ano yung konteksto ng safety? Saan siya nakatuntong? Ano yung tuntungan niya? Siyempre, titingnan natin dyan how we function or how we perform our duties as journalists, meaning rooted siya sa ethics and responsibility. And in fact, sa ating human values. So ano yung dala-dala natin in the practice of our profession?
Kung babalik tayo sa usapin ng trauma, trauma happens, no? Kahit yung kinover mong eleksyon ay peaceful, kahit hindi ka nakasama sa massacre, walang sumabog na bomba dun sa presinto na pinuntahan mo, pwede ka pa rin maapektuhan. So, ang mga journalists should build resiliency. Kailangan maging malakas, kailangan i-recognize na normal na maapektuhan. Hindi kahinaan yung ma-disturb, hindi kahinaan yung maiyak, hindi kahinaan yung if you want to say no to certain coverage, okay lang yun. And the biggest source of strength is always connection. Yung solidarity. That's why it's important to organize, to talk together, to be together. Dahil dun din nakikita yung lakas, no? Cliche yung merong lakas sa pagkakaisa. Pero totoo yun. Kahit magaling kang journalist, kahit sikat ka na journalist, you actually need the support of your colleagues, yung connection. That's what makes us stronger. So, maganda na nagkakausap-usap, nagkikita. In journalism, mas nagagawa mo siya kung mas sama-sama kayo. Hindi ko sinasabing pack journalism. Iba yan. But being strong together, I think
Tsaka yung feeling
the most important.
Feeling na meron kang masasandalan, di ba?
Yun yung laging sinasabi ng mga nag-a-attend ng peer support. Ang sarap ng pakiramdam kasi alam mong merong sasalo sa'yo.
A campus journalist din po, I have seen din po yung power ng solidarity when it comes to such attacks na knowing na kahit yung hanay na sasalubong sa'yo, but when you realize na marami kayong magkakasama, it instills a certain kind of strength na harapin yung ganong ano. So, masabi talaga natin na journalism is really, ang core talaga nito is community po talaga, no? And then, with that, I would like to say din, to echo yung sinasabi po ng kapwa nating media practitioners na an attack to one is an attack to all. So, I would like to add din na since we're talking about elections, I think it's our na criteria para sa mga mamamayan, sa mga botante na piliin din natin yung mga pinuno na nag-value sa press freedom kasi nakikita natin kung anong klaseng kalibre ng governance meron sila. So, when we have leaders na who attack the press, it means it's indicative na they have no regard for the people's right to know. They have no respect dun sa karapatan yung makibahagi dun sa workings ng ating lipunan. So, ayun po. This is why journalism cannot be apolitical talaga. Since lahat talaga din ng struggles ng mga journalists is nakatali din po doon sa political context na meron po tayo ngayon. So, ayun po. Maraming salamat po ulit sa pagpapaunlak sa ating mabigat yet fruitful na discussion. So, dahil po sa inyo, naniniwala kami na worth it po yung worth it ang tahaking ito. And seeing na even after 3 decades, we're still here, carry on, holding on the line. So, it inspires us, aspiring journalists na ipagpatuloy yung Yeah. So,
personally, I'm very happy that we have young people like you who are taking on moving the kind of journalism that we want to see, moving it forward and transforming the landscape of journalism in the Philippines, no. And I think you're in the right direction, and you're wearing your hearts on your sleeve, so to speak, in terms of how to practice journalism the way it should be practiced, taking into consideration that it's not just a job, it's something that you commit to. At tatanungin nga natin lagi dyan, like sa community, yung mga journalists dyan, magkano lang mga sweldo? So why do they keep on doing journalism given those conditions? Ang lagi sasabihin is, ito yung, pero dalawang dapat na landscape yung tingnan natin. Ito yung nagsasabi na, because wala namang ibang pwedeng gumawa na para malaman ng mga kababayan namin ano nangyayari. Meron namang, on the other hand, sinasabi na pwedeng opportunity rin ito para sa aming personal gain. But mas kokonti yon. So mas marami din yung nagsasabi na kailangan namin gawin ito for people to be able to understand and know what's going on around us and to be able to address local issues, for instance, para maintindihan namin. So, nandun yung level of commitment. So, hindi dito yung laging usapin ng magkano kikitain ko, sisikat ba ako, etc., etc. Although, of course, nakikita rin naman natin, especially in Metro Manila, meron din ganon. Pero ito yung realities ng journalism in the Philippines. But what I'm saying is that yung ginagawa ninyo ngayon, I think is a step in the right direction. And it will invigorate journalism practice, not only in campuses, but also in the mainstream. So ano yung pwede nyo i-contribute? It's really providing that impetus. Parang na-challenge din, I suppose, yung journalists who are practicing journalism right now. Ano ba yung pwede nating tingnan na standards? And laging bumabalik sa aking isip si the late Joe Pabia, yung veteran journalist who used to be the executive director of the Philippine Press Institute. Sabi lang niya lagi sa akin, tatlo naman dapat yung tingnan dyan ng journalist. Strive for what? Excellence, excellence, excellence. Pagka sinabi mo yun, ano yung paano mo pagdadaanan? All the principles of journalism. And then, kasama na dyan yung how to keep safe. Kasi, ano ba yung saan mo i-root ang safety? It's really how you practice journalism.
Napaka-exciting na panahon para maging journalist. Kasi ang daming nangyayari in terms of innovations, nagbabago yung audience behavior, nagkakaroon ka ng marami pang platforms bukod dun sa traditional na radio, TV, dyaryo. Parang, tapos panahon din siya ng paano mo i-reinvent din or paano mo i-tweak yung the journalism that we do or nung panahon namin, paano mo siya i-adapt sa kasalukuyang mga nangyayari. So, iniisip ko nga kung katumbas ba to nung nagkaroon ng television?
Parang ganon.
Dati puro kayo dyaryo, tapos radyo, tapos biglang nagkaroon ng TV na isang bagong platform. So, baka hindi, baka higit pa doon. Kasi ngayon, wala na yung monopoly sa media ng information. Anybody can get information and publish information. So, nandun yung challenge. How do you make journalism relevant sa panahon ngayon? And at the same time, how do you keep journalists safe and mentally and physically? Dahil sa maraming risks, maraming disruptions, maraming mga changes na nangyayari. So, mas exciting maging journalist. Para sa mga bata, pero para sa mga amin, very challenging. Ang kailangan na lang namin maghabol, paano ba pindutin to? Ano ba tong bagong app na to? Ano ba tong AI na to? pero I think for the young ones, ang ganda niyang panahon. Ang kailangan lang is pag-aralan nyo kung paano nyo gagamitin yung mga bago ngayon para sa pag-improve ng journalism. Kasi yun naman yung babalik ka sa core mission, babalik ka dun sa core values ng journalism. Regardless of anong bagong app meron, bagong platform meron, yung core mission at yung core vision, yun pa din. Di siya magbabago. Cheers.
Thank you so much po. And we hope and we will strive na may pagpatuloy kung ano po ang inyong nasimulan. So, ayun, syempre maraming salamat din sa ating online brewers and listeners na nag-tune in sa episode na to. And we hope you guys learned about dun sa trauma journalism since it's highly relevant, especially na overwhelming ang mga nangyayari ngayon. So, ayun, before we end, please allow us to take this opportunity po na to give this token of appreciation for granting us this episode po. Yan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Binawasan niyo pa mga allowances niyo, ha? Thank you very much.
Salamat.
Maraming salamat. Thank you.
If you don't want to miss any of our posts, follow us at Bruce Room Studios at all social media platforms. So yun, muli, ito ang Unseen Scars of Election Reporting. Hanggang sa susunod na episode ng Cup of Jorn. Thank you so much.
Thank you.